Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 3 years, the Albanese government's weak leadership and bad decisions have compromised community safety and national security.
Australia, we have a liar in the lodge. He is weak, indecisive and out of his depth.
It's hardly been subtle, and it has been a consistent message.
Labor has put our economy in an incredibly weak position.
The opposition leader's attacks on the Prime Minister and the government for being weak have been one of his longest running.
We are seen as a country with a weak Prime Minister, with a Prime Minister who's out of his depth and unable to make the decisions needed to keep us safe.
We're not going to apologise for having a strong leader that will stand up for national interests, particularly with a track record in national security, as opposed to Anthony Albanese, who's been very weak on this issue.
Halfway through the white heat of an election campaign, what goes around comes around, and the questions of judgment and character are everything.
What we saw yesterday was Peter Dutton doing what he does consistently, which is always overreaching, always dialling it up to 11. But in this case, being quite reckless with a neighbour of Australia.
Peter Dutton fabricated a statement by the Indonesian president. Now, this is an extraordinary thing for a man who wants to be the Prime Minister to do, to actually try and verbal the President of Indonesia in order to make a domestic political point. He is simply too reckless and too aggro to be the Prime Minister.
Peter Dutton is too risky and too reckless to be the Prime Minister of a great country like ours. He is temperamentally unfit to manage our relationships in the world and to manage our economy here at home. What we saw yesterday was a disqualifying moment from Peter Dutton.
The military website Janes reported yesterday that Indonesia had received a request from Russia to base military aircraft in its easternmost province of Papua, 1,400 kilometres from the Australian mainland. The story quickly erupted and the opposition leader went in for the political kill, suggesting the government should have known about the request before it was publicly announced. The Morrison government had faced similar questions when it was revealed during the 2022 election campaign that Solomon Islands had signed a security pact with China. But Peter Dutton went a step further yesterday.
Did the Prime Minister know about this before it was publicly announced by the President of Indonesia? And what is the government's response to it?
It would obviously be of great concern, even alarming to Australia, if Russia was seeking to base military planes so close to us. But reasonably quickly yesterday, the government was able to report that Indonesia had assured Australia that Russia would not be allowed to base long-range aircraft there. Defence Minister Richard Marles released a statement yesterday afternoon saying the Indonesian Foreign Minister
has said to me in the clearest possible terms, reports of the prospect of Russian aircraft operating from Indonesia are simply not true.
Peter Dutton and his colleagues persisted with their usual line of attack. Why didn't the government know about this? Answering their own question with the usual lines about being weak. Strategy and defence experts tell 7:30 that while it might be reasonable for intelligence agencies to, for example, notice concrete slabs being built for an airbase, it is unrealistic to expect them to know of a conversation that may have taken place between two other sovereign countries. And Dutton's verballing of Indonesian President Prabowo is seen as a particularly bad call.
Mr Albanese has suggested that you were wildly irresponsible in your comments yesterday with regard to the potential for Russia to base aircraft in Papua. One, were you? And two, has the government answered all outstanding questions on this issue?
Well, the answer to the first part of your question is no. There are a lot of questions that the government still has to answer.
Beyond giving Labor a chance to warm up the reckless line, the opposition leader's verballing of the Indonesian president undermined his credibility on national security.
Did President Prabowo ever say that Russia requested access to an Air Force base?
The reference I made was obviously to what is a very credible military website, and that talked about government sources and of the Prabowo government sources.
It's all been a reminder too of Peter Dutton's less than glorious history in our own region, including an infamous joke made at the expense of Pacific neighbours about climate change.
Anyway, it was a good meeting. When was it? It was
The time doesn't mean anything when you're about to be, have water lapping at your ears.
It was a burp.
Yeah.
The remark has lived on. Last week, President Surangul Whips of Palau, the incoming chair of the Pacific Islands Forum, made it clear the Pacific has not forgotten the remark.
The phrase, water lapping at our door, is not a metaphor or a punchline.
And today, the ABC's PNG correspondent Marian Farr reported PNG's Foreign Minister Justin Tachenko saying he personally hopes Labor wins the Australian election, stating the incumbent government had done, quote, a tremendous job of rebuilding relationships in the Pacific.
Well, I've known Justin for about 20 years and he's a colourful character. He's a friend of our country, so we can work very effectively with the government.
Peter Dutton's mishandling of this national security issue comes after he reversed the Coalition's prudent economic manager's position with a spendathon at his campaign launch on Sunday. Polls show the Coalition's position fading. It needs to be staying on message. Ahead of the leaders' debate tonight, it seems to have been doing anything but that.